Hello and welcome back to I Am Licensed. I'm Ruan, your character and brand licensing enthusiast, and today we're filming another episode in our friend Sarah's hobby room. So now that you know where I Am Licensed started, let's look at what exactly licensing is. To spice things up, and because I can't miss an opportunity to explain something in an overly complicated way, I thought of two unconventional ways to explain exactly what licensing is and hopefully help you get a better understanding of how it works. Example number one, the short version. Licensing is like networking for products and brands. Does that make sense? When they meet and they're a good fit, the whole becomes better than the sum of its parts, or at least that's how I think about it. Example number two, the slightly longer version. Let's look at a driver's license. What is it? Well, you might say it's a card or something you need to drive a car. You can say it's legal permission to drive a car, or perhaps a convenient way to prove your age when you go to a bar. In simple terms, maybe, a driver's license is legal permission for you to get from point A to point B using a vehicle, where point A can be wherever and point B is probably that bar we talked about earlier. So Ruan, you nincompoop, how does a driver's license connect to licensing? Well, here it is. Similarly, licensing is legal permission for you to use a character, brand or trademark, the vehicle, to move your product from point A to point B, where point A is your factory and point B is the loving hands of your customers. Is that a good example? Does my overly complicated analogy make it a bit clearer? I hope so. First off, the object or thing being licensed is usually intellectual property, or IP for short. It can be anything, from a trademark to a copyrighted work to even software. It's usually something someone has come up with that's protected by law. Next, to get licensing, you need an agreement, which is called a licensing agreement. This agreement is between two parties. The one is called the licensor and the other one is called the licensee. The licensee being the person or company who wants to use the property, and the licensor being the owner of said property. I used to remember these names by imagining a situation where the property owner tells someone, "Sorry, you can't use my property." Sorry, licensor. The property owner, licensor. And for a licensee, someone saying, "See, I told you it was a good idea to get this property." Yeah, maybe that's just me. The licensing agreement is basically the contract outlining the terms and conditions of the partnership. You also might have heard of so-and-so's licensing program. This is just a way to refer to the strategy to broaden the reach of an IP and the different licenses that have been granted by a licensor. As you can imagine, the licensing agreement needs to be quite circumspect. It usually outlines a ton of things like minimum guarantees payable, royalties, territories, and how long the license will last. You might be able to risk a guess as to what these terms are, but let me quickly explain them. The minimum guarantee is the guaranteed minimum royalty the licensee will pay to the licensor. The royalty is the percentage owed to the licensor of each unit sold by the licensee. Business, unfortunately, is no crystal ball, and the minimum guarantee is a way to compensate the licensor if sales aren't as high as expected and the licensed product isn't performing as well as planned. If the deal is quite risky, the licensor can demand a higher minimum guarantee, while if the licensor's property is not a mega hit or not as well known, the minimum guarantee can actually be quite low. To show good faith, the licensee and licensor can also agree to an advance. But remember, this is an advance, not a bonus. So the licensor will usually only start receiving royalties once the advance has been recouped. Something else covered is the physical boundaries of the licensing agreement. Typically, agreements are limited to certain countries or territories to ensure the licensees are on top of their game and in touch with the consumer needs in that area. As a result, licensors typically have licensees in various territories who are on top of their game and know the ins and outs of their respective business landscape. The licensing term, that is, for how long the IP is licensed to the licensee, is another hot topic for negotiation. To develop and manufacture a licensed product takes time, effort and money. So it's understandable that the licensees would want as long as possible to recoup their investment. Licensors, on the other hand, tend to be wary of long contract terms since they run the risk of being stuck with an underperforming licensee for a long time. But these are not the only things included in a licensing agreement. You have to consider a dizzying amount of possibilities and hypotheticals as well. As an example, imagine this situation. You're negotiating a licensing agreement in the 80s. VHS is booming with no end in sight. Would you have considered the advance in technology and remember to include the rights to things such as CDs, DVDs, and digital mediums? Like I said, business is no crystal ball. Licensing also has some established categories. We all know entertainment licensing. Think of all the Avengers or Harry Potter or any cartoon character based products we see daily. Naturally, it's also the biggest segment of the licensing market. But there are a few other interesting categories like art licensing. Think of repeat patterns used on greeting cards. Or celebrity licensing. Think of Rihanna's line of perfumes and cosmetics. Or collegiate licensing. You know, all those university merch you see. And sports licensing. You know, your favorite team's fan kit and so on. Licensing is a vast industry and I've just scratched the surface in this video. If you want to learn more, I really recommend checking out Licensing International's website or getting your hands on a copy of The Business of Licensing by Greg Battersby and Danny Simon. Or if you're really feeling generous, subscribe to I Am Licensed and join me in learning more about the industry responsible for making a ton of our favorite things. Thank you for watching. See you next time.